So this week's Parsha, this week's Torah portion is Mishpatim, which means laws. And in it we learn many laws, specifically about interpersonal relationships, laws about how to treat people who work for us, all sorts of laws about behaviors between people. And Mishpatim, the word for laws, usually it's contrasted with chukim, which also means laws or rules. But chukim are usually understood to mean laws that we don't understand, commandments that we don't understand the reasons for, something like something that we would never come to think of on our own. We would never come to using reason, or we don't understand the reasons for. Whereas mishpatim, these are the sorts of laws that we perhaps could have come to on our own. We could have thought of something similar, at least, not stealing, not killing. Laws of interpersonal relationships that make sense to us. We can understand rationally why they're good. But the Sfat Emet, a Hasidic commentary on the Parsha, he talks about how actually the Mishpatim, they existed in some sense before humans. Their existence is prior to humans, meaning that they're not really based on human reason. It's not really for the reasons that we think intuitively that these laws hold, even if we can see intuitive reasons for them. And he says that even though there are these reasons that we can see, that actually we're meant to keep them just because God said so, and not because of the reasons that we can see, not because they make sense to us, but just because they're the laws that God gave. And he connects this to the way that the Jewish people said, Naseh v'nishma, we will do and then we will hear, we will do and then we will understand. So they said first that they'd be willing to do whatever it is that God commands of them, and then only later to understand. And it's explained that by just doing, because we trust in what God commands of us, then we merit to come to a place of understanding. And so here too, the Sfat Emet says that it's by first doing the Mishpatim, these laws, specifically the ones that seem like they have rational reasons, specifically those laws, if we do them just because God commands them and not for the reasons we think they have, then we'll merit to see deeper and deeper reasons behind them. And there's an interesting parallel between this idea and something that the Mea Shiloach talks about on this same parsha, and also on this giving of Mishpatim. So the Mea Shiloach is another Hasidic commentary, Rav Mordechai Yosef Leiner of Ishbitz, the Ishbitzer Rebbe. So he also talks about Mishpatim, and he connects the giving of Mishpatim to a verse from Yeshayahu, which says, Shamru Mishpat ve'asu tzedakah, keep the laws and do justice. And he talks about how Shamru is, it has to do with waiting. And so what does that mean? What does doing these laws have to do with waiting? He talks about kind of situation where things in a person's life don't go the way they want. It's a person has a difficult time, and it makes it difficult for the person to serve God. And a person might sort of get angry and frustrated in the situation and really want God to give them the conditions that they need in order to serve God with ease, whether it's money or good health or just like a kind of ease, an easy situation to serve God in. And so a person can get frustrated and think, well, look, if I'm doing these commandments, then why doesn't God make it easy for me? Or if I want to do more commandments, or if I'm trying to do them, then why doesn't God make things easier for me? Why doesn't God give me the conditions that I need in order to be able to do them more easily? And so the Me'ashiloch says, no, shamor, shamru, mishpat means that there should be a kind of waiting and a kind of trust in doing the commandments. We're meant to just do them from a place of dvekut, cleaving to God, and just trusting that what God does is actually for our best, even if sometimes it's very hard to see why or how that could possibly be. But then he says paradoxically that if we do the commandments, if we keep the laws from that kind of place, not from a conditional, I really want God to give me what I want and to make things easy for me, but rather from a place of trust and a place of relationship, this close cleaving relationship to God. If we do the commandments and keep the laws from that kind of place, then for that person, krova yeshuato lavo. So his redemption is near. His redemption is close to coming about. So it's kind of paradoxical. Like if we the idea is that if we keep the laws because we want God to give us what we want, and we think that God should give us what we want because we want to keep the laws and he should make it easier for us, then we end up very frustrated. But if we keep the laws just out of cleaving to God and out of a trust in whatever God does as being for our best, then our redemption is soon to come. Then very quickly God takes us out of the difficult situations that we find ourselves in, and brings us to a kind of redeemed place, where in that redeemed place, the Me'ashiloch explains that ultimately it will become clear to us why the things that happened to us had to happen, even if they were very hard to receive at the time, and even if at the time we're not really able to see how they could be good for us. But at the end of things, ultimately, God will reveal why they had to be, the reasons, the deeper reasons for things that we couldn't see. So I think there's actually this parallel between the two cases, what the Sfat Emet talks about with the commandments and their reasons on the one hand, and what the Me'ashiloch talks about with the things that happen in our lives and not always being able to see the reasons that they happen or why they're good for us on the other hand. And so in the case of the commandments and their reasons, if we do the commandments because we see that they make sense, and we do them kind of conditionally on their making sense to us, then that's kind of not the Sfat Emet is telling us that that's not really the kind of relationship to the commandments that we should be striving for. But if we do them for their own sake, if we do them just from a place of trust in God's command and accepting God's command for whatever it is, then we actually merit to see the reasons, the more, deeper and deeper reasons for them. And so we actually do get to access and see the reasons, but only if we don't do the commandments only and ultimately for the reasons that we see. So there's this kind of paradoxical structure here. And also in the case of things happening in our lives and the way that we relate to that, there are things that happen in our lives that we might think we understand the reasons for, and things that happen that we feel like we can't possibly understand how it could have a reason or how it could be good for us. And then if we serve God and pray and do the commandments from a kind of conditional place, that if I do this, then God will give me what I want, or that God should give me what I want, or that things will get better for me, from a kind of perspective that I can understand, or from in a way that makes sense to me, then a lot of times we end up being frustrated from that kind of relationship to God, thinking that, okay, if I only do this, then I'll get this thing that I've been wanting and that I need, and that will help me serve God, and then it doesn't always happen when we want, or doesn't always happen at all the way we want. And so it can be a really kind of frustrating pattern. But if we serve God not from a place of wanting anything but specific in return, but just from cleaving and from trusting from a kind of unconditional relationship, then God actually gives us the very things that we want. Whether maybe they don't necessarily look exactly like we thought they should look, but then our salvation is near, our redemption is near, and God does give us the blessings that we're seeking, but only if we don't, if that wasn't the reason that we were, if we didn't do the commandments in order to try to get them. So there's this kind of paradoxical structure in both cases. Like if we're doing the commandments conditional in a way that's conditional on reasons, then we fall short. And if we do the commandments that's conditional on something good that makes sense to us, that we want happening to us, then we find ourselves frustrated. But if we do these things for their own sake, then we merit to actually see the deeper reasons and to get the things that we want, after all. And so why is that? It's this kind of puzzling structure, and it seems like it's kind of it's kind of this funny puzzle. Like if we really want X, but if we do something in order to get X or because of X, then we don't really get X, or we don't really fully get X. But if we do something independently of X, or without really like trying to get X, or not conditionally on X, then all of a sudden we get it. And so what's this structure about? Why should it be like that? Is it just a kind of just to like get us to do things for their own sake, or to not try to understand, or to not try to have things go well for us in our lives? What is it about? I think really it's about the nature of these things that we want. It's not a kind of trick that we only merit the reasons or the good things if we are not trying to get them, or we're not attached to them. Maybe that's the way to put it. If we're not attached to them, it's not a kind of trick that we only get them when we're unattached. It's actually because perhaps this is a suggestion that if we do things conditionally on reasons, or we base our observance of the commandments on reasons, then it's a kind of misunderstanding of the nature of reason and its capacities, because it's like we're treating it as a self-standing thing, that reason can justify the commandments. But really we see in philosophy, a lot of times we see that if we try to define exactly what makes things wrong, or what makes things right, what makes things good, what makes things bad, we try to come up with definitions and theories, but all the definitions and all the theories have counterexamples, and we see that it's no matter how we try to define these things, a kind of humanly developed definition never quite matches up to what we intuitively understand the thing that we're trying to define to be. So this happens all the time in philosophy. And so there's something about our reason that it gives us a lot, but there's something incomplete about it. And so if we see it as this self-standing, complete thing that we can have for its own sake or in itself, then there's kind of something mistaken about our relationship to it. Whereas if we see reason as something that comes in and from a relationship, it's part of divine wisdom. Our reason, the things that we can see via reason, are things that we're given access to, that are actually part of a divine wisdom. And so if we see reason as being not independent of, but part of a relationship with God, then it's the very relationship with God that can give us that reason, that by which the reason is accessed. And so when I do commandments not from a place of trust and from a place of a kind of unconditional relationship, then that relationship can grant me, can kind of open up for me deeper and deeper access to reason or to divine wisdom, to the divine wisdom behind the commandments. And similarly with the good things, with all the things that happen in our lives, if we think of the good things that we want in our lives as like these self-standing, independent things that we can want for their own sake and that we can have in themselves, whether it's health or money or family, if we think of them as these self-standing things, then it's a kind of misunderstanding of these things' nature. Actually, they happen, they are in relation to God. They're things that are given to us by God all the time, and they're things that we that are meant to be had and experienced in as part and parcel of a relationship with God. And so if we think of them as something separate that we can get separately, then it's a kind of misunderstanding of what they are. Whereas if we orient ourselves around a relationship with God, around a kind of cleaving to God and trust of God, whatever it is that God brings into our lives, then naturally that relationship is one that comes with blessing, that comes with things opening up for us in our lives and things going in a way that allows us to continue to develop our relationship with God and do what we're meant to do in the world. And so it's not a kind of trick that we can't get the things that we want if we try to get them, and only if we don't try to get them, then we get them. It's in the nature of the things themselves that they're not actually separate from a relationship with God. And it's in the nature of putting ourselves into an unconditional relationship with God where we accept without necessarily understanding both God's commandments and also the things that happen in our lives, the things that we think we see reasons for, and also the things that we don't really feel that we see reasons for and that are hard for us. When we come with a relationship of acceptance and then continue to serve God from a place of trust and not from a place of trying to get something or trying to make things better for us, trying to make things go our way, then just naturally from the orientation of that relationship, from the orientation of ourselves as being in this kind of unconditional relationship with God, then naturally the channels of blessing in our lives can open up. So I wish us all kind of opening in our ability to let go of the things that we feel we need to be a certain way and that are maybe actually making it hard for us to be in a kind of open, trusting relationship with God of the kind that allows the real blessing and access to wisdom to flow into our lives.